for the last generation.
I'm
you have a choice.
the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations with
I
that
realize
woman.
that this is something
Miss
he
Lewinsky.
is
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Good morning, Cleveland. You are listening to Backfire. This is Daniel Brantley in place of Steve Hickson, who is currently busy catching panfish in here with John and Franklin. Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hey, Daniel.
Y'all doing all right?
We're doing great.
I'm so used to saying, hey, Steve. I almost said, hey, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a poor excuse for a host, but we'll see how it goes. We'll get started locally this morning, although there has been national stuff going on, obviously, but we'll start local. We got the commission providing $14.5 million for the new Lake Forest Middle School. It's a curious development. We've got Dan Rawls as the only dissenting vote.
Well, I mean, apparently Dan Rawls had this odd idea that when you strike an agreement and one side agrees to one amount and the other side agrees to that amount, that barely over a year later, that money, that amount, should have been stuck to.
And explain to our listeners who may not be aware of what that deal was, what that looked
Well,
like.
guys, look, and I know you. Here's what's so hard about trying to rein in government spending and rein in the growth of government is the progressive powers that be will always push and say, well, you don't support the children. And I know all the parents out there want a new Lake Forest, and I agree, and I've talked about the fact that that was a disaster from the get-go. And, of course, no one's ever been held accountable for the positioning and the building of that school in the first place. But having said that, this is a 40% increase in the cost of this school in barely over a year's time. Now the county commission funding, and that's another thing, they obscure these things. They go, oh, well, it's only a 20% increase. That's in the county's portion. But the school board came up with, I think, another 1.2 or 3 or 4 million as well. When you total that, it's a 40% increase in the cost of that school in a little over a year. Now, Charlotte Peak Jones, who actually did vote for Dan Rawls' substitute motion to stick to the original agreed amount, which of course that substitute motion lost, but she did state 12, as a builder, she hasn't seen any kind of huge increase in building costs. So when you get into the numbers, what you find is they added to the scope of the building. They added classrooms. They added more to the building. 40% increase. No discussion about that at the county commission. No one even said, hey, wait a minute, guys. We agreed on the size of this building, and that's how we arrived at the cost that we agreed to fund. No discussion on how you go to a 40% increase in the cost of this building.
Yeah, that would not be acceptable if someone was building my house and I had
right.
a 40%
Who out there
increase.
building a house in a little over a year would take a 40% increase in the cost if it was your money in your hand? And that's another one. Mayor Davis got up and said, oh, we can do this without a tax increase. Well, he was asked point blank in that meeting, is he guaranteeing that if this estimate of cost has a 40% increase like the one a year ago obviously has had, or if there are cost overruns, is he guaranteeing that he will find the money somewhere else and won't end up forcing the commission into a tax increase? He put his head down and wouldn't answer.
Yeah. And it's curious, you mentioned, not doing it for the kids, and I like Bill Winters. I don't know him really well, but seems like a decent guy, but he basically says that in the meeting. He says that we've waited 4 years for this. There's no need to shortchange our students.
I love Bill. Bill's a great man. He's done a lot for the kids, and he's incredibly sincere. But that wasn't the point. The point wasn't, I don't want to help the kids. And that's what always happens. Anytime you ask a question that's difficult for the other side to answer, all of a sudden, your integrity gets attacked. You don't care about the kids. You don't care about education. The question was, why have we seen a 40% increase? It's not that, Dan Rawls' substitute motion wasn't, let's don't build the school. It was,
let's give what they asked for.
Let's give what we said we would give a year ago. Let's stick to our original agreement. Let's, keep our word.
Yeah. and have the school board do the same to keep their word. Franklin, you look like you had something to say.
Well, it just seems to me that there's alternatives. You know, the footprint of these schools that they build ought to be done in a way that they're designed for the ability to expand them in the future as needs arise. And I don't hear much discussion about that.
Well, because you hate children if you ask a question like that.
Well, John, I only like my children, actually.
That's true.
But, you know, it's such a difficult issue. Clearly, they got significant problems out there at Lake Forest right now, by all accounts that I've heard anyway.
Absolutely.
And so they got to deal with it at some point, and a decision has to be made. But I share your concern about that kind of cost overrun.
Yeah.
Now, here's my point, too. I'm not saying they don't need the extra classrooms, but don't you think the general public, the taxpayer, was due a discussion of that?
You know, the question now is, how much of that's just extra cost? How much of that is it's a bigger facility than we talked about last time?
And tell us why.
Is there something new added to it? I mean, I would like to have more information about it.
I mean, the point here is I may have completely come around and said, absolutely. Now that you've explained why you want to add 7 more classrooms, I understand. But the point is you don't ever get that discussion. We had no discussion of that in the county commission meeting. Commissioner Rawls tried to ask some of that, and he got, you hate the children. You don't support the school. And, of course, the room was packed full of parents who want a new school and deserve a new school, rightly so. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you don't have a vibrant and transparent conversation about why we're spending 40% more than we were told we were going to have to spend barely over a year ago.
And where is the new school going?
Right back in the same swampy
location.
place.
So the commission has inherited this problem. And
sure.
so you understand they have to build a new school, but now they're going to throw it right back in the same.
Right back in the same. And that's another thing. There was no discussion of soil samples and of what, you know, that I've said this on this show for years. I duck hunted there as a teenager, stood knee deep in the mud.
You should still be able to.
In that exact spot. So we got, as a taxpayer, we got no discussion about what's being done to make sure that site is correct at this point for the building. Now, I know they've brought it in. They were building one big building, from what I understand, instead of these pods, which was a Florida design. And that's going to probably move it into more stable ground. But this is what I've said all along. We never discuss who screwed up. Because there's always powers that be trying to protect their image.
Yeah.
But because you don't discuss that, you are setting yourself up for the possibility of making the same mistake again.
Yeah.
So part of my questions I would have wanted really, really extensively answered was, what are you going to do to that site to make sure it's not a swamp for the new school?
Yeah. Well, they'll have the same problem with the new Cleveland gym. I don't know if I told you before, that's on my neighbor is a retired soil scientist, and he did work out there and at Lake Forest and told them this is the worst land in Bradley County to build on. So
and we're going to build again on it.
They did that for the commission before they built it. And yeah, and
we're building again on
him
it.
Because they got the land at the right price, right? But the Cleveland gym is built on 2 different types of soil so that one stays steady a little better and the other sinks a little bit. So we will end up with a crack in this new gym also in 40 years or so, and we'll say, how could this happen? Let's build a new one.
Well, because we didn't do our due diligence on the front end. You know, that's what kills me. And what's amazing is at least I feel a lot of the time, Franklin and I end up agreeing on things like this. We may disagree on how much to spend, but we both agree, if you're spending the taxpayers' money, you should spend it as carefully as you would spend your own money. And just like the gym you're talking about, would you go out and build a house and tell the engineer, just test the left side of the house for structural stability. Don't test the right side of the house.
Yeah.
Well, seems to me the Cleveland situation's a little different. I mean,
sure,
that's the land they got.
They had to build the gym if you're not going to move the whole building.
I
but
get
Daniel's
that one,
right, too. You want to explore that and say, do we need some extra pylons on this side?
Well, hopefully they've
Maybe
done
they
that.
did,
I hope so.
But speaking of due diligence, we've got a...
let me finish one thing. Please, you all out there, especially the people in Dan Rawls's district, because I was told people actually said, well, they're going to come after you. They're going to come after your seat. And, of course, Dan, kind of traditionally for Dan, said, bring it. But, guys, someone who wants to actually make sure your money is spent wisely, that's the kind of county commissioner you want. You want questions asked.
Agreed. But speaking of due diligence, we've got the county looks like they may be doing an increase in the fire tax. If approved, all county property owners, that is us, would pay 0.4312 cents per $100 assessed value. Current rates are $3,440 for Fire District 1 and $41.21 for Fire District 2.
So, guys, the county fire department, and again, the same type of thing. As soon as I say this, someone's going to say, you hate the fire department, and try to get all the employees that they do a great job. Nothing against the men and women that work in the fire department, but we were sold by the county mayor and several of the commissioners that this would be a cheaper alternative to remaining in the contract with the city. Has anybody actually sat down and looked at how much we're spending now and how much we would have been spending under the contract with the city? And I don't know the answer to that. So that may prove me wrong. But has anybody even seen that conversation happen at the county commission? This is the second fire increase, and that's not counting the fact that when they first did it and technically claimed they didn't raise your fire tax, they expanded the number of people who were covered by the fire tax, which in my book is a fire tax increase.
Okay.
Bada bing.
Well, let's wait and see if we actually have a transparent discussion about why the fire department continues to need increase after increase. And again, I'm not saying they're not legitimate needs. My point is the original sales pitch was this was going to be cheaper.
I do agree that particularly with respect to the county commission, there is a lack of transparency in the operations on a day-to-day basis. And so...
Well, let me say this,
and frankly, I've heard exasperation expressed by some commissioners and so forth.
I was going to say, it's a lot of times it's the information that they get out of the county mayor's office. You know, the mayor's very quick to say we can do this without a tax increase, but when he was asked to guarantee that he would come up with the money to avoid a tax increase, he wouldn't answer that question. And he's also part of the one that said, we can do this fire department. It's better for us to have a standalone fire department. Well, have you seen him in any of the discussions when we've had to increase these taxes? And I guarantee you, the first time an election rolls around, here's what'll be said. Well, the county commission raised your fire tax. The county commission raised your property tax. Well, a lot of times the budgets that are presented to the county commission paint them into the corner where they have no choice. And that's pretty cool. You get to, as county mayor, you get to give all the cool stuff away, and then you get to blame the cost increase of that cool stuff on the commission.
Politics is a beautiful thing.
Well, the commission is silly to allow that to happen. They ought to be asking these questions similar to what Commissioner Rawls asked of the mayor. Mayor, you're quick to make a proclamation we won't have a tax increase, but you're also quick to blame a tax increase on the commission, who officially, they are the one who has to vote it in. But they're a lot of times not the ones that actually were responsible for creating the problem.
Well, I mentioned this before we got started, and I don't know that either of you had heard of it, but the school board was going to have some faith leaders and a theologian come up with the school curriculum on religion. Lilios was nervous anytime religion is mentioned with school. Chris Turner says he won't stack the deck with Baptists. Charlie Rose says his aim is to be fair with everyone, with all religions treated the same. Is this something, well, before I even ask my question, Franklin, you've got something on your mind.
Well, the idea that the academic curriculum is being created by church members strikes me as just ludicrous. What you're talking about is having a educational academic discussion of religion.
Because a secular academic would be able to create the correct curriculum?
No, there are professional theologians in universities and so forth who aren't pushing a particular view, but they spent their career studying these things. Those people coming up with a curriculum that would make more sense to me.
Actually, let me
just say, when I was in high school, we had a class on Bible. That was actually the name of the class.
But here's the problem, Franklin. You're right. And I understand the class
And it-
on Bible, but we've actually had attack on Bible clubs. Extracurricular clubs have been kicked off campus.
Let's not mix up the two issues.
Well, that's
There's two,
but
they're two
no, wait a
dif-
minute.
two different issues.
They're not two different because the very academics that you're talking about designing the curriculum are the same academics who have kicked Bible clubs, extracurricular, voluntary Bible clubs off campus. So why should I trust them to be fair with the Christian community?
Now,
First of all, whether they've been kicked off campus or not, I don't know.
I brought the
What I
stories
do-
all
what
across
I-
the country.
But not in every community.
Not
Some
in every
communities do that,
community.
and those are local decisions made by those local communities. They get to do that.
Well, let me
right?
let me give you
What I have said all along is, if you're going to have one club for a set of students like that, you can't say only this religion can do it.
we agree.
You have to let everybody do it.
But you know what they did?
Okay.
They kicked the Christian Bible clubs out.
I'm not disagreeing with the concept of them having the clubs.
When we had the Christian
I'm saying
Bible
you got to
clubs,
open it for everybody.
they
But
made
that's
the same
point I'm
argument.
making-
I know, but that's
point
the
I'm making with
argument the
curriculum.
liberal progressives made, Franklin. And within a few years, when they didn't have enough satanic clubs apply for membership, their next move was to kick the Christian Bible clubs out of the school.
Here's what I can tell you, John. We had those kinds of clubs when I was in school. We had a Bible class. I will tell you without any question that Bible class slanted toward being
Was it
an
a
extension.
required?
No, it
Was it
wasn't
a required class?
No,
Then
no.
what was the problem?
Well, because taxpayers are paying.
So
for it,
what?
That's why.
It was. So what? We pay for all kinds of elective classes. Who decides what elective I get to choose and what elective I don't get to choose?
Well, I think there's clearly a constitutional issue.
Well, there's not. You all have created that
No,
separation of
that's
church
not.
issue.
No, we haven't
What
done
the
that.
what the separation of church issue was that the government should not choose a particular sect of religion.
That's what I'm just saying.
It wasn't that you couldn't have religion. In
I
government.
didn't say that. What I said
An
was
elective course in Bible should be open for people to choose
when that's
or not
when
choose.
that's the only option provided to them.
Well,
yeah.
maybe there's, frankly, let's say we offer Hinduism and nobody takes it for a year or two, then that's a waste of taxpayer dollars. Let's move on to something people do want to take.
Well, why wouldn't we have a course that really did talk about major religions,
all right.
including Christianity?
I'll give you a reason
why not do
Let
that?
me read you, this is a news story. Let me read you, this is our problem with that kind of concept. Kindergartners in New York City, a New York City school, have now created an American flag made of a desecrated American flag. They took the stars and they took all the other world flags, a bunch of other world flags, and glued them onto the red stripes and then wrote under it, "We pledge allegiance to an international flag." And then they stood around this big banner and were led in a pledge of allegiance to an international flag. That's the problem, Franklin. All of these good secular progressives that you want to turn this over to, they're crazy.
John, I think it's fairly obvious these days that neither party, whether you want to call them progressives or conservatives, has any shortage of crazies in them.
So, and you're not going to discuss
So-
this issue.
No, I'm not going to
Do
say
you
that.
think
I'll say that's crazy.
Do you think,
I'll say
all right, let me
that's
ask you a
crazy.
question. Are
But-
kindergartners probably the most impressionable age? So why would someone desecrate the U.S. flag in a school
Well,
and
first of all, I don't know what
orchestrate?
the exercise actually was, and you hadn't told
You
me
see
that.
it, the picture of
Well,
it
I see
right
a
there.
picture
We,
of it, but
we
I don't know
pledge
what they
allegiance
did.
to an international flag. Do we teach
Is
our
this
children?
one class in one kindergarten in one city in New York, and
Yes.
that's what we're wired up about?
Yes.
Are we talking about the entire New York City kindergarten program?
Actually,
There's a huge difference.
there's not any difference. Frankly, the fact that this is tolerated anywhere is a disgrace. First off, it's actually under statute a crime to desecrate the American flag. So not only are we teaching the kids, don't pledge allegiance to your country, pledge allegiance to some international order, but we're actually teaching them, oh, hey, it's okay to violate the law and desecrate a U.S. flag.
John, answer my question.
What?
Is this one class in one kindergarten in
Actually,
New York
it's
City?
one school. It's apparently the entire kindergarten in one
And
New
how
York
many
City
schools
school.
they have in New York
I don't
City?
know.
Probably
I don't know
about
how many
1,000.
This is just the one that one parent sent the picture in of. I don't know
Okay.
how many other it's happening in.
Okay.
My point is, unless in a day or two I see where the principal of this school is either severely reprimanded or fired, then it's a problem.
Here's what I'd say. You got a double standard. You hold those people on the far other end of the spectrum to the same standard you hold those people to, and we'll have a conversation about meeting in the middle.
We're not in the TEA, the NEA. They're a far left organization that set most of the education policy. You're going to claim that the conservatives have some grip on this? We're losing all of these battles in our schools because the progressive liberals see the schools as an indoctrination point.
You've got a bunch of local church people establishing the curriculum for a taxpayer-funded class. And you're telling me that you're losing these battles? That's crazy.
Overall, we are.
Come on.
Overall, we are.
Clearly not.
Well, they did withdraw their plan, and if this helps any, they say that their approach will be to, quote, teach religion as history and not to proselytize or require memorization of tenets of a particular religion.
Franklin, this is overall. For example, Cleveland High School here in Cleveland, Tennessee, hasn't had a valedictorian in years because of a liberal progressive policy that it's unfair to all the kids that don't win valedictorian. That's a load of horse crap.
I think that policy, although I disagree with the policy, so let me start off with that, okay? I think that policy is founded out of this constant debate that they've had for several years about how you measure the valedictorian based upon whether it's your grade point average or which classes you take.
That's their excuse.
That was an argument when I was in school.
I will tell you, there's no argument among conservatives that A, you can determine who the valedictorian is, and B, that you should.
I didn't say that
but
you can't.
But even here in conservative Bible Belt America, East Tennessee, we have a school system that has decided that the competition is just too damaging for our little tender darlings.
That's not what I understand the debate to be about.
Well, then why don't they put it back? Bradley's able to do it. Are you saying that Bradley is their contention at Cleveland?
John,
that Bradley
which part of I disagree with the policy did you not hear?
Then
I'm just asking you to state the debate
correctly.
correctly.
It to what it is. It's political correctness from the progressive left.
It has nothing to do with that in that particular case. That's not what they were arguing about. There was nobody saying anything about anybody's ego.
Actually, I've been told by school boards that it's unfair. Actually, I was told by Martin Ringstaff that he just felt like it was so unfair to all the kids that didn't win valedictorian. So the director of Cleveland City Schools, previous director, point blank told me that he thought it was unfair to the people that didn't win.
So why don't you take it up with him or her?
Well, my point is, even in a conservative area like lower East Tennessee, progressive values invade everywhere they can. They're like snakes crawling in the foundation.
We had this debate when I was in high school.
And eventually, the liberal progressives, they just keep at it, and they finally beat you down.
And this is the problem, John. You guys see a progressive conspiracy in every issue, even when there's not one.
Because there is a progressive conspiracy all across this country to undermine traditional values.
I'm not sure how we got there, but I do have a question, and I may have just missed it. What is the reasoning behind it, Franklin?
What you had was several parents up in arms because you had some students win the valedictorian award because they had a higher GPA. But those were students in some cases, not every year, but in some cases, who'd taken a boatload of easier classes and didn't take the higher math and the higher science classes.
But they fixed that, Franklin. They weighed it now.
Not
and it was like that when I graduated Bradley.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty easy thing to fix.
And it was an issue the year I graduated.
Well, they have fixed that. They fixed it at Bradley. They fixed it at Walker Valley.
John.
And guess what else?
Which part of I agree
understand.
We ought to have valedictorians are you not hearing?
Well, my point
I am
is
just saying that's what the argument was about.
Well, we just refuted that argument, so what's their new argument?
He's not saying
they haven't made a new argument.
So in other words,
he's not saying he agrees.
It's the same argument they were making 35 years ago.
Which here's the point, Franklin. If you can refute that argument and they continue to hold to it, then that's not the real reason.
Again, John.
That's not the real reason.
I didn't say they refuted the argument.
We refuted the argument. You weight the classes.
Again, you can't. You're not listening.
Here's the point.
Franklin doesn't agree with
I just said you're just ascribing it to something that it's really not about.
Well, then what is it?
It's about what we just said.
No, it's not, because that doesn't hold water. All you do is weight the classes.
Wait a minute, John. Hold on. you've just talked for a long time this morning about the arguments in the county commission about how they're making the same arguments they've been making for 20 years that didn't hold water then. I didn't say it holds water. I just said that's what they're fighting about.
But here's what's logical about this thought process, Franklin. If you look at someone and they give you an argument, and that argument is clearly refutable, clearly disprovable, and yet they continue to hold to that argument, what you end up with is two choices. You end up with either A, they're not smart enough to understand that it's refuted, or B, there's actually something else going on, and that's just a screen.
Debating this with you is like peeing in a hurricane. I'm agreeing with your ultimate conclusion. I'm just saying you're calling it that they're arguing about one thing, and I'm saying no, they're arguing about something else.
But here's the problem.
That's it.
Yes, but
it's not complicated.
Franklin, I gave you a direct quote that I was personally told by the director of school that it was about how unfair the competition was.
Okay, but this started before Martin Ringstaff was the director.
And I asked him point blank to change it. And he point blank told me he found valedictorian choices unfair to all the kids that didn't win.
Rick Denning never said that.
He's the one that put it in the first place.
I agree, but that wasn't the argument he was making.
And I don't think that, I think Franklin may agree that the excuse that he said is a smokescreen. It might be a smokescreen.
No, he'll agree that it's wrong, that it's been refuted, but he won't agree that it's a smokescreen for the real reason, which is these people have a progressive ideology that all competition's bad.
No, what it is ultimately is that they want to avoid having parents squabble with them. That's what it's about.
Well, then they need more backbone, and they need to get out of the office they're in.
Now, see, that's ground that we might agree on,
If they can't take the pressure, then get out.
Okay.
I think you agree on most of the ground, actually.
Yeah.
Well, hey, before we go to break.
Excuse me, I got to go dry my pants off. The wind was blowing again.
Woo! Before we go to break, this is pretty local for us. I guess it's in Chattanooga. We've got superintendent there, Rick Smith. They voted not to buy out his contract after what happened at Ottawa with the basketball players.
Today, he's announced that he intends to work out his contract.
He does plan to work it out. What's happened here? Is this should he have been responsible for this, or has the right?
You have two immovable objects that came up against each other. There's plenty of people that think he ought to go, but then a lot of the taxpayers said, "I don't want to pay him $350,000 to go."
It's expensive,
and a contract's a contract, and I'm sure they didn't feel like they could break it, or they didn't have the will to outright fire him.
You know, it's all too often the way things go. You get an issue that comes up, and that becomes I'm searching for the word here, but that's become the justification rather than another justification that might be even bigger, but nobody wants to talk about. The real fact is that performance in that school system has not been very good the last several years. Okay, that's a very significant issue. The Ottawa High School issue has been used as the thing, oh, this is the reason we need to do this, because he bungled this.
Kind of as a catalyst.
Well,
but the problem is, from a legal standpoint, he may not have bungled anything. Maybe from a PR standpoint.
He really didn't do probably a fireable event.
Probably not.
So, at least not one you would win in a court of law.
So that's what you're dealing with. But in reality, there's some dissatisfaction with him over the performance of the system.
And then
but that's a legitimate thing to be talking about.
But then you have the other problem of that school board in the process that could have been brought forward, which is the review process, gave him exemplary reviews last year. And that's another problem. They didn't have the backbone to actually air those kind of issues when the forum was correct for airing them. And now, again, that review creates a real legal problem for terminating him, because you just gave him an exemplary review. And folks, before you say, oh, this is Chattanooga, this is exactly the situation the county school board found themselves in with Johnny McDaniel. You know, everybody said, oh, we don't want to spend that money. Well, you really are between a rock and a hard place. You either let him stay, or you got to buy that contract out, which I will go on the record as saying I have for years argued against these contract extensions that these school boards do. Because it's a chicken and an egg argument. They'll extend the contract, and then when something comes up and someone says, why don't you get rid of him? They go, well, we can't. He's got 3 more years on his contract. Well, why don't you quit extending his contract? Now, they do have a valid position to say, look, we want to keep qualified people, and if we don't extend the contract, someone will hire them away. And I understand that's probably true as well. So it's a tough balancing act.
Well, it's like there's an editorial in the Times this morning that says, well, he ought to just resign.
Well, guess what? He's not going to
He's
do
not
that.
going to, and frankly, not a lot of people without somewhere to go would just give up their paycheck, in that circumstance, if they think they haven't done anything that's fireable.
Now, maybe this is a kick in the tail, and he'll get
Maybe
on the
so.
ball and
so.
correct some of these things people are bothered by.
Yeah.
People, you have to have feedback.
Sure.
And feedback sometimes ends up correcting problems.
Yeah. Sometimes that feedback builds up until something horrible happens and it comes at you. All right, gents, we're going to take a break. We're back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check Into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check Into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check Into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Train Endurance Engineers are an elite group of extremely devoted individuals who stop at nothing to push our heating and cooling units to the brink. That way, when they pick up the pieces, they'll know exactly how to make the Train we install in your home even more reliable. Right now, their target is a Train AC unit.
Touch to control. Fire up the pitching machine.
Their methods may seem unconventional.
Okay, cue the jackhammers.
But it's because of their tireless efforts that it's hard to stop a Train.
When you want an unconventionally efficient heating and air unit that keeps your home right in the comfort zone day in and day out, nothing will do but a Train. To get the best Train service, call your local Train comfort specialist. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. Keeping you comfortable is Mechanical Systems' only business, and they've been providing high-quality service and installations for more than 30 years. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. That's 336-5739.
It's hard to stop a Train. Really hard.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
Every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed. Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center. Or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
Alrighty, we are back. This is Daniel Brantley, and for Steve Hickson, who is out hoping that the crappie start spawning with John and Franklin. Let's jump to the world of national politics. Donald Trump did, he picked up Michigan last night. Dadgummit, already got a call.
Picked up a lot more than that.
He did pick up a lot more than that. Let's take this call real quick, and we will keep moving. You're live, caller.
Hey, good morning. This is Lisa Pope Jones, and I just have to call and correct some information.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to open up a terrible, terrible, terrible can of worms. But I was in the second graduating class of Cleveland High School that did not have a valedictorian. And the reason that we do not have a valedictorian at Cleveland High School is it has gotten too difficult to choose between some of the students, even if you weight the grades. The class before I graduated had to take the grade point average out to the tens of thousands places before they broke the tie. The year I graduated, we had a girl who had been in the local school system her entire life, was a flat-out genius. She's a doctor in Upper East Tennessee now. Super, super brilliant girl. We had a girl who had also very, very smart. She had spent most of her life in schools in South Africa, came here for her senior year. She had been here a few years in elementary school, but the parents were missionaries. She was here 1 year in high school. Well, she had taken classes like Latin and things that were not offered here that were a lot more advanced than what we taught at Cleveland High School. So it was very hard to weight the grades. They could do it one way, and one was the valedictorian. If they did it another way, the other one was the valedictorian. The girl who was so brilliant had a B in PE. The girl from South Africa had a B in Latin. So how do you weight the difference? So they just chose to not choose one. Both of them, if there were scholarships available going to a valedictorian, the school stated this person had the grade point average to have that position. They could have been co-valedictorians, but then they also ran into the co-salutatorians position. So you ended up giving a whole lot of people honors just because so many people were tied. My son graduated this last year, and there were 17 students with a 4.0. Some of those, 16 of the 17 took all honors classes. And knowing all of those children so long, I know it would be hard to choose between those. You choose the 4.0 who excelled in the STEM classes, which is a girl her career goal is to go to Mars. Or do you select the young man that he focused on the English, he took all the English and World History Awards and everything like that. And all of these children are so amazingly accomplished. Some of them have already done more in their life than I will ever be able to do with the rest of my life. So I think it would be nice to have one, but having been there and seen what goes on in the schools, I understand where they're coming from. Now, occasionally there is the parent. Initially, there was a parent who grumbled because her child lost when it got down to the tens of thousands of places. But it really is, these kids excel in so many things now, it's getting harder and harder to determine.
Well, never being even close to in the running for something like that, is it based
I wasn't either.
So I didn't have this issue.
When I heard they got B's in gym, I was like, oh, they pay
But I will tell you that I had a problem with the fact that I took 4 years of math and 4 years of science and 4 years of English, and people that were in the honor society were taking much easier classes. But you know what? And Lisa, I understand. I'm not disagreeing with you that it's hard, but guess what? Life's full of hard decisions, and life's not fair either. Sometimes one guy wins and one guy doesn't, and sometimes they were both qualified to win. This idea that somehow we can avoid making a hard decision, I personally find the idea that we're not going to set a policy up, run it out, and if you have 2, I'm okay with 2. I might even be okay with 3. But to say we're not going to have any, I find cowardly, because life is full of hard, difficult decisions like this, that one person wins and one person loses. And we are not preparing children for life if we tell them this idea that, oh, you're all winners. And I will say another thing. Maybe one of the reasons we have so many people at 4.0s is because we're giving grades away too easily because of the same philosophy.
I know most of these children, and no, they were not given any grades. And I will tell you this, my son could have been one of those 4.0s, but he chose to take honors calculus, and I knew that he would make a B in that class, not because he is not smart, but he just...
Well, I think that
teacher.
I think that John's point dovetails into what you just said there, Lisa.
He made a choice.
Making a B is not an indication your son's not smart.
And he made a good
It means
choice.
that he tried something that's harder and did fairly well at it. And that's one of the things that I think is a discussion to have, because, you know, I have a kid in high school, at Cleveland High School, who's going through some of these issues. You know, we have gotten to the point that we don't understand that a C was supposed to mean average. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. B's were supposed to be above average.
Well, and
A was supposed to be exceptional.
And while we're talking
there
about
has
this,
been
Lisa,
some great inflation in that regard.
in the Cleveland City school system, in the elementary levels, they don't give A, B, and C anymore. And I had a school board member tell me point blank the reason they went to the 1, 2, and 3, which I explained to them at the time when they first did it, is 1, 2, 3. Now I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The top, and I don't even remember whether the top was a 3 or a 1, but it was an 80 to a 100. And I told the school board member, I said, as a parent, an 80's a C, a 100's an A. If you say my child is between an 80 and 100, you have told me absolutely nothing. And the reply back was, it's so devastating when a child gets an F. And I said, well, an F in the real world is you're fired. So this idea that we're protecting them from the difficulties of competition is preparing them for utter destruction in the real world.
Well, I agree that, but also, like I said, I was there with that group, and it was just absolutely too hard.
Well, so what? It's hard, Lisa. It's hard. Life's hard. Hard decisions happen. One guy wins, one guy loses. I lost a speech contest, and 2 of the judges came up to me and said they thought I was the best, but the other boy was a local boy, and they had to vote for him. Well, that's hard, but you know what? It's life.
Well, I also know some of these kids who have got valedictorian who weren't the smartest. They weren't the brightest.
Well, you get some that have cheated, but that's life too.
They just took the classes where they could get the grades, and they got it. So I actually think if you're doing a valedictorian, you should look at more than just grades. You should look at the other things the kids have done, extracurriculars, community service.
But Lisa, I agree with you, but the point here is that's the kind of conversation that would have been productive. You could have said, look, I think we ought to add these other elements in. No one's arguing about the formula you use to determine who the valedictorian is. My point is they just did away with it because they're cowards as far as coming up with a formula to choose the valedictorian.
Okay, so in my class, which girl would you have chosen as valedictorian?
I probably would have chosen the one that had the harder class. I would have chosen the one that got the B in the, I don't even remember what you said, but I know one of them was a B in gym and one of them
Latin.
was in Latin. I would have chosen the Latin one because the Latin's a harder class. If you've only got 2 B's and one of them made a B in Latin and one of them made a B in gym, obviously the Latin one was worth more.
And it seems like it's more of a cultural issue that starts at home where parents teach them, you can do anything and everything. You're the best. You'll never lose. Yeah, You will.
Also, you have so many students who come from other countries now, and it is harder to say.
Well, guess what, Lisa? Those other kids, they're going to be in the workforce competing against our kids.
Only one of them will get hired.
And only one will get the job.
Frankly, to me, that's not much of a concern. Not by any means saying anything negative about those children. I'm glad they're here, and I'm glad they're contributing to our community. I would say that to be eligible to be the valedictorian, it's 4 years at this school. Not,
well, that's
2 years at some school and 2 years somewhere else. It's 4 years here.
Again, whether I agree or disagree with what Franklin said, the point is that's the kind of conversation you have. You work out a formula that you can agree to. You don't give up on the whole concept because life is a competition from beginning to end.
Well, exactly, but then maybe you need to be in charge of determining which of those students does get valedictorian.
Well, the problem is people like me that say those kind of things, all the people who are worried about their delicate flowers of children wouldn't vote for me because they go, gosh, he might actually draw a line. He might actually make a decision.
My child might find out, ...
You know, I think what you could do is you could review the entire curriculum for the school, and you could assign a weight to every single class.
Well, that has been done.
Well,
but then you have the students who have come from other school systems, other countries.
Well, there are lots.
Again, I would say if you spent 2 years at McMinn County High School and 2 years at Cleveland High School, you're not eligible to be the 1985 valedictorian.
I would be okay with that
because you got 4 years there.
I would be okay with that too. And now that's going to that would make some people mad. I understand, but guess what? It would also do if you're at McMinn County, because a lot of times these people don't move their home. They just decide to change schools. So if you're at McMinn County and your kid is in the running to be the valedictorian at McMinn County, and you know if you move to Cleveland High, you're not going to be allowed to do that, maybe you don't move. You know, so the point is, as long as you have full disclosure out there, and from that standpoint, Lisa, I've had lots of kids that I've talked to them. I've looked at papers that they're writing in college, and I can tell you, I had Miss Fitzgerald as in pre-college English at Bradley High School. What passes for correct grammar in college courses at this point, she would have ripped to shreds. So I'm concerned that one of the reasons, as I said earlier, that all these kids are getting these high grades is we are not grading things very difficult anymore.
But they were grading very difficult when I was in high school.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in 85, and I had Doris Hickson for advanced grammar and composition, who had her master's and was working on her doctorate. And I made a low A in that class, maybe a high B. But I started to UTC, and I had a professor whom I felt was grading my papers based on the fact that he did not like my topics and not on the actual content of the papers. So I went to Mrs. Hickson with all of my papers I'd saved. I got permission from her to submit my papers in my college English class. She showed me the corrections that needed to be made to turn in an A paper, and I was still getting B's and C's in this class. I was able to submit the information to administration, and that particular professor was not invited back the next year.
Well, Lisa, congratulations. You know what you learned through that adversity? You learned that life's not fair, and you learned to deal with adversity and overcome it.
I know that life is not fair.
I know, but the point is you overcame it. You actually corrected that situation in not just your life, but for other people. That's life. And these kids that come through with everything, get a participation trophy just for showing up, they're not prepared to deal with adversity. That's what concerns me. I'm okay with it being a little unfair because you know what? Life will always be a little unfair. And if you're prepared for it, just like you were, you know how to challenge it and overcome it.
I know, but I just don't think giving someone a title is...
Well, how about a title of you're hired or you're fired?
So, well, my dad has been in a position and encouraged him to have more than one job at a time. So, but...
At least I don't disagree with you about the problems. I just don't think that the solution is to abandon winners, which is what we're doing as a culture. We're going, we don't want to determine who the winner is. Well, life is a competition of winners.
Well, actually, the week before graduation, we had almost 3 hours of nothing but winners. Kids who had won awards for everything. And like I said, it was, some kids are, you know, focused more on they lean more towards doing well in certain categories. But there was, you know, a whole entire ceremony saying these are the winners, these are the kids who are going to do great things in the future, and we don't necessarily need to say one's better than the other. So I understand your thing about competition and everything, and actually, some of the kids I know who've made valedictorian, they didn't strive to do anything, and may not turn out as well in life as the kid who had to work really hard to get there.
Well, Lisa, why give a math award then? Why give an English award? You're saying you had the week before you had all these winners. Why give any of those? Because those were, I'm sure, questionable. There were people side by side in those. Why give any designation at that point?
So.
All right. Well, thank you for your call, Lisa. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Bye.
All right. We're back on Trump, and Franklin said that he won a lot more than Michigan.
Well, he did. He won everything last night,
He did
except
win
for Idaho, I think.
What's the distinction on Idaho? Something I've talked about before.
Potatoes.
Closed caucus.
Closed primary. So when you have Republicans vote, Trump doesn't win. So once again, I will say all of the Lamar Alexanders and the Governor Haslam's in the world who have championed this idea that we want to welcome everybody into our family discussion, this is what you get. You get someone being elected that probably doesn't represent what at least has traditionally been Republican views.
Well,
and by the way, Cruz won Idaho. Cruz actually, the hard one, and I hate this because I think he's a good man. Rubio had a tough day yesterday. You know, he came in pretty far back. Cruz beat, in Michigan, he beat Kasich, which was not expected.
You know, I think the Republican race is down to next week now, likely, because I think next week will tell us what the path will be. I think if Trump wins Ohio and Florida, I don't think he can be denied the nomination mathematically. If he wins one of the two, I think the odds still favor him. If he doesn't win either of those two, I think that's when the GOP kind of nightmare contested convention becomes a serious possibility.
Well, first of all, I don't buy the idea that a contested convention is a nightmare. It's democracy. It's the way the system's meant to work. Now, the fact that over the last 80 or 100 years somebody has outright won every time is great, but the system is there for the very concept that we're dealing with, that you have multiple people run, they kind of evenly divide, and at some point you have to get in there and figure out who wins. But having said that, even if he wins Hawaii or Ohio and Florida, he's still, from that point forward, now Franklin's right, it's probably pretty solid, but he still has to win 55% of all the delegates after that.
I think I saw it's 52% if he wins those two states by the last analysis I saw. But my point is,
but what I was going to say is if he only wins one of them, it goes up to 59%. If he wins Florida and not Ohio. If he doesn't win either of them, it goes up to 69%.
That's why I said if he doesn't win either one of them, the contested convention scenario becomes realistic.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's funny that all the focus seems to be on the supposed problems or ugliness in the Republican race.
It's not
when you look at the Democrat race, you've got a lot of young, energetic Democrats that are really enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders. And they're watching. He won last night. He upset her in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And he's winning a pretty decent number of these contests. Sure. But then you look at his tallies, and right now the tally is, before yesterday, she had 1,130 and he had 499. The reason for that is the superdelegates.
Well,
and so there's a lot of people that are going to be very upset on the Democrat side.
More importantly than that, and I'm fine with the discussion, but more importantly, her lead against delegates that are earned from the primaries and caucuses thus far is much bigger than President Obama's was against her in 2008 at this point. It's almost twice as much. And the delegate math just doesn't work going forward. Overwhelmingly, she's likely to prevail.
But at that time, she actually had the superdelegates as well, and they began to peel off of her. I think my point, Franklin, and the point for a lot of these people that are really excited about Bernie Sanders is they feel like the system is rigged. And they feel like they're being cheated.
Well, but my point is, I'm only talking about the ones earned in the primaries. And the facts are that in many of these states, like Mississippi, for example, last night, she's not winning 52-48 or 51-49. She's winning 80-20.
Right.
And the proportional awarding of the delegates is such that she has a huge lead at that point. Forget the superdelegates right now, just the other ones. And that's the exact same scenario she was on the other side of in 2008.
Yes, but
you can't catch up.
Right, but is it your contention that when she gets over the magic number, including the superdelegates, she won't immediately trumpet that?
Oh, of course she will. Any candidate would.
Well, that's my point. My point is everybody talks about how there's going to be all this rancor and uproar in the Republican ranks. You're going to have the same feelings from the Bernie Sanders people because they feel like they're systematically being cheated.
I'm not arguing. I don't think anybody's being cheated in either case.
I didn't say they are. I said they feel like they are.
Well, what I do think is, and the only place that becomes an issue, honestly, is if you get a contested convention, and I think if Trump gets there with a substantial lead and then does not get the nomination, then I think you're going to have those real bruised feelings, not from the election process, from the idea that it happened in a brokered convention. I think if that happened on the Democratic side, you'd have the same result.
Well, you've got some of that. In Iowa, for example, apparently he may have actually won the raw vote because the Iowa Democratic Party has refused to release the raw vote totals.
But even in that scenario, you're talking about a difference of 1 or 2 delegates.
Yeah, but you're talking about cheating.
That doesn't change it.
I know it doesn't change it, Franklin, but people feel like they've been cheated.
Well, nobody's feeling cheated when somebody's winning primaries 80-20. There's no cheating there. That's decimation.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but the fact that they will feel that way isn't related to whether it's right for them to feel that way.
In every political race, Democrat or Republican, as you've been pointing out today, there are winners and there are losers. Mm-hmm. And it's always incumbent upon the winner to find a way to bring the loser back into the fold and to reach out. That's always tough to do.
My comment was really more on the punditry. Mm-hmm. That they should be discussing the possibility for very severely bruised feelings in the Democrat Party as much as they do in the Republican Party. Oh, and by the way, folks, just in case you were wondering how these candidates make ends meet, Hillary Clinton has been paying herself to run for president out of her campaign funds since last April to the tune of about $250,000. So not only does she think she's entitled to be the president, but apparently we have to pay her to run for president.
Well, we'll say the numbers from this morning for the delegates. Clinton's got 1221. Sanders has 571. According to what I saw, the visual made it look like about a third were superdelegates for Clinton, which would cut her down to maybe 850, something like that.
It doesn't really matter, and that's the point I was making.
Well, yeah, she'd still be over 250 ahead of him.
Right around a little over 200. But that's twice as much as Obama was ahead of her in 2008. And the point was because of the proportionate allocation of delegates moving forward, when he wins a race 51-49 or 52, that it doesn't yield anything but 1 or 2 delegates.
Giving him an advantage. Yeah.
And every time there's another state where she wins 80-20. So last night they split these 2 states, but her delegate lead increased because of that.
Well, I mean, actually, Cruz had some of the same issues.
Sure.
Last weekend, he actually ended up with more delegates out of his wins than Trump ended up with. And there are some cases, like in Tennessee.
Minimally.
Well, like in Tennessee, for example, there are statewide delegates that are allocated, and there are countywide delegates or district delegates. There's cases where one candidate won the statewide vote, but another candidate actually ended up with more delegates because they won more of the congressional districts. Because, if you win Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis, you're going to carry the state, but someone else might win 5 of the congressional districts.
Sure, it's possible.
And on the Republican side, Trump's at 458, Cruz 359, Rubio 151, and Kasich with 54.
I just think at this point, moving forward, well, we're going to have a much clearer picture next week after the Ohio and Florida races in the Republican side. Do you think that's fair, John?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue.
I think it's really hard for me to see how Rubio stays in the race moving forward without damaging himself. There's some indication he really ought to consider dropping out before Florida.
Well, and there were some rumors that he was, and that got, they tried to blame Cruz again. Cruz didn't have anything to do with that, and he immediately took quick steps to disassociate.
Well, I'm saying if Rubio wants to have a viable career in the future, he might ought to consider getting out, because a loss in Florida would do damage to him as a national candidate.
Keep in mind, too, he's not in the Senate after this either, so I'm not sure what he's going to be doing anyway.
And I do need to say something on behalf of Doughball, who told me to tell John that the GOP needs to stop beating up Trump.
Well, I mean, it's been a really strange thing. I mean, to see the last two Republican nominees give speeches denouncing.
Well, here's the problem. For example, Trump University, and he in the debate said that the Better Business Bureau faxed him a report. Well, they came out 2 days later and said we didn't fax him anything, and the grade is a D. Always has been a D. I am more concerned. For example, Bernie Sanders. He said that white people. Let's see. When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor. Well, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the 5 poorest counties in the country are all 95% white. So what kills me is that we as an electorate, both on the Republican and the Democrat side, don't seem to be moved a whole lot by facts anymore. We're moved by emotion. So Mr. Trump, Mr. Sanders, they play on emotions here, and people, you give them a fact and they go, yeah, but I still feel like this. They're like, okay, well, by all means, don't let a minor little thing like a fact get in your way.
I don't know how to contend with it. Last night I watched Donald Trump's speech, and he plugged 6 of his own companies and products that he sells in the press conference, taking conference of reporters. Trump Steaks, Trump Water.
Hold up, Trump Steaks went out of
Trump
business.
Air, hotels. He plugged them on national television for free. It's the most. I can't even begin to explain.
A whole new world.
But on that note,
I believe it's go time. Any final words?
Well,
everybody have a great week.
I will leave you with this one story. The Charlotte Observer has been pushing a new bill over there in North Carolina that would have allowed anybody to use any bathroom. So men could use the women's bathroom, women could use the men's bathroom. And they advocated for that through a guy named Chad Severance, who they quoted over and over again. They were notified weeks ago that he was a registered sex offender, a sexual predator. And for weeks, they continued to quote him. They continued to allow him to be the lead advocate for that bill without ever informing the public. So you just had an Academy Award given to a movie called Spotlight for exposing sexual predators in the Catholic Church. But the Charlotte Observer, when it's an LGBT activist, covered up. Not only did they not expose, they covered up the fact that he was a child predator pushing that bill.
With that, we will call it quits.
Thanks, Daniel.
Always a pleasure. See you guys next week. It's been Backfire.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now,